A line of prisoners lurches across a hot road, dust lifting like breath from the earth. A woman steadies a child whose sandals have split. Iron rings bite at her wrists. Soldiers shout in a language she knows and a language she does not. On the horizon, city walls rise, terraced, glittering with glazed tiles. Nineveh. Drums thud. Not for her. For the king inside, the one who sent letters ahead of the captives, announcing their arrival. She had sat once on a carpeted dais. Now she counts steps to keep from stumbling. At a gate tower, scribes scratch names onto wet clay. Officials sort the weary, craftsmen to workshops, boys to barracks, elders to granaries. The women, her, toward the palace. The word they use is soft. Bētānu, the women's house. A messenger leans close. "You will be safe," he says, then adds, "if your people are obedient." The woman looks back at the road that vanishes into heat. Behind the walls, a new title waits for her, one that binds more tightly than chains, and it will not be hers to refuse. Time and place. The Neo-Assyrian Empire. Roughly 900–612 BCE, stretching from the Tigris to the Mediterranean. Cities like Nineveh, Kalhu, Nimrud, Assur, and Dur-Sharukin pulse with relief-sheathed palaces, winged bulls, and libraries of tablets. In public, Assyria boasts of order, roads, canals, taxes, tribute. In private, power sits nearer the bone. The camera tracks past carved stone walls. Scenes of conquest fold across them like an illustrated ledger. Siege ramps, sappers, battering rams, long files of deportees. In these lines walk women, wives, daughters, and servants of the defeated, visible in the art, named in the texts. The inscriptions call them daughters, palace women, sometimes queens. They are treated as assets whose custody can unknot a rebellion or knot a treaty tighter. This episode is not about every Assyrian or every century of Mesopotamia. It is about the 9th to 7th centuries BCE and about a specific policy. What Assyrian kings and administrators did to the wives of defeated enemies, and why. The sources are royal inscriptions, legal codes, reliefs, and excavated archives. Each was made to serve power, so their claims demand care. Where records are fragmentary or contested, you'll hear that. When Assyria conquered, how were elite foreign women used? Were they merely slaves? Or were they instruments, hostages, tribute, or client royalty, rebranded to stabilize a swelling empire? The palace doors open. Ceremony meets choreography. We go inside, but the marble floors don't show what the clay tablets record. Anchor 1, Nineveh. 701 BCE. The Annals of Sennacherib list the tribute sent by Hezekiah of Judah after the campaign of 701. Among ivory-inlaid furniture and metals appear people. His daughters, his palace women, male and female singers, brought to Nineveh. The Taylor Prism in the British Museum summarizes these deliveries as part of a political settlement, not the sack of Jerusalem, but its submission. Anchor 2, Nineveh. 680s, 670s BCE. The inscriptions of Esarhaddon record a different move. He boasts of installing Tabua, raised in my father's palace, as queen of the Arabs. A foreign woman, reared at court, returned to rule under Assyrian oversight. The text makes policy visible. Take elite children or women young. Acculturate them, then redeploy them. Anchor 3, Northern Arabia. 690s BCE. Campaigns against Adamadu name queens of the Arabs, Tealhunu among them, in fragmentary lines. Scholars compile these attestations cautiously, noting breaks and duplicates, but agree that female rulers were targets of Assyrian operations. Their capture or displacement undercut resistance networks. Anchor 4, Nineveh. 40s BCE. Ashurbanipal's Annals on the Rassam cylinder describe taking royal families wholesale. His wife, his sons, his daughters, his palace women, male and female singers, counted as booty and moved to Assyria. The possessive pronoun refers to a defeated king, an enemy whose legitimacy is disassembled person by person. Anchor 5, Ashur, CKA. 12th–11th C. BCE, legal backdrop. The Middle Assyrian laws include provisions about war captive women and marriage status. One clause recognized remarriage if a husband was a prisoner of war for years. Although earlier than the Neo-Assyrian period, these codes illuminate a legal imagination that sorted women by status and circumstance, useful context for later practice. Anchor 6, Kalhu, Nimrud. 1988-89 CE, archaeology. Excavations uncovered the queen's tombs at Nimrud, with names like Yaba, Banatu, and Atalia, showing the jewelry, seals, and administrative seals of royal women. These burials outline the architecture and bureaucracy of the palace women's world, the bētānu, that many foreign captives likely entered. Taken together, the record suggests capture, relocation, and reclassification. Wives and daughters of defeated rulers became levers of compliance or building blocks of client rule. The lines on stone are dry. The consequences were not who orders. The king stands at the center, but the machine is wider. Royal scribes draft correspondence. Eunuch governors and magnates command logistics. Overseers of the bētānu manage daily life of palace women. Orders travel by tablets and seals, carried by mounted couriers. Who suffers? Enemy elites become hostages and household personnel. Not every captured woman becomes a concubine. Records mention singers, musicians, and palace women, titles that map to pay grades and duties. The child of a captured woman might be registered with a patron deity or assigned to a workshop. Architecture. Palaces are systems embedded in stone. Reliefs show processional gates. Texts list storehouses for grain, textiles, and weaponry. The bētānu, often translated imprecisely as harem, is better understood as a women's administrative quarter, with senior queens, junior wives, attendants, and staff. Logistics. Deportations move people en masse. A conquered city yields craftsmen, soldiers, children, and women. Registrars record numbers. Quartermasters allocate rations. Reliefs like those from Lachish show families trudging with carts, textiles, and tools. In royal annals, the lists are cold. Brought to Nineveh. Money, skilled women, weavers, singers, enrich palace output and court spectacle. Power. Holding an enemy's wife or daughter sharpens a governor's letter with an unstated threat. Fear. Treaties like Esarhaddon's succession. Treaty lace oaths with curses that imagine what happens to wives and children if the oath is broken. The leverage is familial and intimate. Flows. Capture, classification, queen, palace woman servant, placement, palace temple, household, outcome, hostage, client ruler, assimilated dependent. To the state, this is a supply chain. To the women, it is an unchosen migration. The map clarifies the question, how far could the machine reach into a person's life, and what did it squeeze out? To answer, we walk the stages. On the Lachish reliefs, bodies move like a river. Women with children, men with pole-bound bundles. A two-wheeled cart creaks past olive trees. The king sits on a throne of carved stone, watching the flow. The inscription frames it, Sennacherib, before the city of Lachish. Victors and captives both become labeled figures. The labels outlive the people. They were marched. They were counted. They were brought in. Assyrian chroniclers do not narrate personal collapse. They announce deliveries. For a queen or high-ranking wife, capture unthreads a tapestry of alliances. In Assyria's logic, a woman's kinship ties, to priests, to city elders, are ports the state can seize. Once seized, those ports can be reopened later, under a new flag. On clay prisms, the king is a collector of rarities, ebony chairs, ivory couches, antimony, and human beings. The words daughters and palace women sit between metals and fabrics, as if they were soft goods. Modern readers can protest. The scribe's stylus cannot hear us. They were itemized. They were escorted. They were absorbed, and that was merely the first inventory. The counting was just preparation. At the palace, the gate divides into lanes. One leads to the bētānu. A steward unrolls a list. Women are sorted by rank and use. A forensic lexicon of empire, queen, secondary wife, palace woman, singer, weaver. If a captured woman was already married, older law traditions had rules about her status. If a husband was lost in war for years, remarriage could be recognized. Law doesn't show mercy. It shows control. They were renamed. They were clothed. They were registered. Texts preserve new names that fit Assyrian theophoric patterns. Clothing, jewelry, and veils signal who may be seen and by whom. The palace is not a fog. It is a bureaucracy, and the bētānu is a ledger with breath. Here, women's labor makes wealth, textiles, music, ritual food. Here, too, intimacy becomes policy. A royal visit, a pregnancy, a child whose name folds an enemy city into a genealogy. They were placed. They were silenced. They were watched. For some, sorting is not the end. A few are singled out, tutored in etiquette, language, and cult. They move from captive to instrument. Mini Cliff. One of them is already being shaped for export. Esarhaddon's inscription names Tabua, a woman raised in my father's palace. The phrase holds a plan. She wasn't simply housed. She was cultured into a form the empire could deploy. Then she is sent back as Queen of the Arabs. The message to her people: your ruler speaks our language and owes us everything. They were trained. They were titled. They were returned. Sometimes the return is to a different city than the one they left. The geography of rule is drawn by Assyrian hands. Earlier inscriptions mention Arab queens in conflict. Tialhunu appears where text breaks and duplications force caution, but the pattern is visible. Remove a queen. Install another. Bind both people in caravan routes. Scholars debate details. The strategy is legible. They were symbols. They were bridges. They were leashes. Names change meaning. A name given at court can become a chain in public, a whisper in the ears of tribal elders. Remember whose palace raised her. But leashes work only while they are held. Treaties hum with imagined violence. In Esarhaddon's succession treaty, the oath-taker swears that if he rebels, curses will strike his household, wives, sons, and daughters. The threat is cosmic in the text, but practical in life. Your family is here within reach. The leash tightens across miles. They were named. They were invoked. They were leveraged. When Ashurbanipal records taking a vanquished ruler's wife and palace women, he doesn't just celebrate victory, he advertises collateral for the next negotiation. If a province wavers, a letter can remind, your queen is comfortable, may she remain so. The implication requires no verb. They were tokens. They were guarantees. They were warnings. Not every woman suffered the same fate. The empire was uneven. Some became household managers with seals and authority. Others remained anonymous labor. The leash's length varied, but it always led back to the throne. One procession shows the whole system at work. The mourning is ceremonial. Nineveh's gate shadows the road. The column of captives halts beneath Lamassu, winged bulls whose stone gaze does not blink. Soldiers peel away. Scribes approach, reed pens ready, baskets of wet clay set on low stools. A minor official reads aloud, names in a language that is not hers, titles in one that is. When the woman hears her title, wife of now a dead king, she looks at the ground. They enter the gate tunnel, cool air on hot faces. The walls here are bare. Reliefs begin deeper in. A turn, a courtyard, and suddenly the world explodes with carving, scenes of hunts, towers, orchards. She sees a carved woman in a cart holding a child. The strange ache of recognizing a stranger. An overseer of the bētānu meets them with attendance. He is efficient, not cruel. He notes ages, crafts, languages. A singer in the group is sent one way, 2 weavers another. The woman's group is led under a colonnade into a room with paneled cedar. Women already inside, some in linen veils, some in bright wool, look up and then look away. The smell is myrrh and oil and washed stone. In a side chamber, an elderly matron sits by a table of seals. She is not a prisoner. The gold at her wrist says Queen. A younger woman stands beside her with a tablet listing rations. The matron's eyes settle on the newcomer. From the west, she says. You know the seventh-day songs? The captive nods. Good. You will teach them to the girls. The king likes variety at feasts. The twist in the air is subtle. Usefulness becomes protection. The matron marks a symbol beside the captive's name. It is not freedom, but it is recognition. Days blur. The captive learns the palace routes, from women's house to storehouse to small shrine, to garden court where palms rustle over a pool. She learns which doorways are forbidden and which are merely watched. She learns Assyrian words for things that had no word in her old life. Sealed basket, ration token, cloth allotment. Weeks later, she is called to a small audience hall. On the wall, a relief shows a city captured. On a table, a bronze mirror catches a line of light. A governor from the south kneels, offering bags of dye. Behind him, a scribe reads a letter from a desert tribe, troubled by raiders, asking for a woman who knows both tongues to mediate. The king is not present, but his authority is a temperature. The matron speaks low to the captive. You will go with a caravan. They will call you lady. Your old name will not serve here. You will be Tabatu. The captive hears the click of a new identity. You will return in the rains, the matron adds, if all goes well. The matron does not mention the obvious. If all goes well means if they obey. The caravan leaves at dawn. The city opens, and for a moment she feels wind on her face. Outside the walls, the world expands. Fields, shrines, canals flashing like cuts of metal. She moves with an escort, a litter, and a bundle of tablets that name her authority. Weeks away, at an oasis where tamarisks change the smell of the air, she meets elders who weigh words as they might stones. She speaks to them in their language, then repeats the phrasing in Assyrian. She delivers gifts, textiles, oil, embossed bowls. The eldest asks, "And your people?" She says only, "I am in the king's house now." By noon, an agreement lies on a tablet, rolled and sealed. A messenger leaves north, clipping the desert like a swift bird. The elders are satisfied. Raiders will be paid off. Caravans will pass. The captive understands. She is not only the proof of conquest, she is its instrument. Months later, in Nineveh again, she steps into a hall hung with rugs and bronze lamps. The matron receives her. "The roads hold," the matron says. "The king is pleased." A scribe reads a new decree, title, rations, quarters, and a line that surprises her. "Bētānu shall instruct young women for service beyond the river." In the silence after the announcement, the matron leans in. "The empire is a net," she says. "Some are caught. Some hold the knots." The captive lowers her head. She knows what she is now, and she understands why the net never sleeps. 2 more anchors confirm and complicate. The Lachish reliefs at the British Museum, moved from Nineveh in the 1840s, remain the most vivid visual dossier of Assyrian deportation. Scholars warn, these are royal propaganda, curated scenes emphasizing order and justice as kings defined it. Still, the iconography of families, carts, and attendants aligns with analytic claims of mass relocation, and with tribute lists including royal women. The Sennacherib prisms, Taylor, Chicago, Jerusalem, and Ashurbanipal's Rassam cylinder are preserved and catalogued. Translations differ slightly across editions, but the core formulae, his daughters, his palace women, his wife, counted as booty, remain. Where lines are broken or duplicated, editors mark lacunae. Modern compendia like Rinap, royal inscriptions of the Neo-Assyrian period, provide apparatus for those gaps. Arab queens, mentions of Tealhunu, and other rulers come from few and sometimes damaged inscriptions. Scholarship collects and cross-checks them. Interpretations differ on whether specific phrases imply capture, exile, or political sidelining. The consensus is careful. Assyria targeted female rulers as nodes of resistance. Legal continuities, citing Middle Assyrian laws for Neo-Assyrian practice, risks overreach. Historians use them as context, not proof, signaling continuity of certain status logics. Curation and loss. Over the past century, publication histories have shifted, editions revised, casts and squeezes re-examined. The Nimrud Queen's tombs report suffered delays, and, during the 2003 Baghdad Museum looting, archives were damaged, later reconstructed and republished, 2016. This is not a conspiracy. It is the fragility of archives in war, a reminder that our modern view is filtered by what survives. The debate isn't about whether women were seized. The annals say so. The debate is about how often, which roles followed, and how to read silence. Silence, after all, is a policy too. What emerges is not a gallery of cruelty for its own sake, but a policy engine. The empire weaponized kinship. The wives and daughters of defeated enemies were not simply trophies. They were switches. Flip them, and a province stays quiet. The engine runs on 3 fuels. Visibility. Reliefs perform deportation. Annals announce who was delivered. When a list notes his daughters, his palace women, the message is public, to rivals, vassals, and subjects. The king can reach into your house, Wikipedia 2. Administrative reach. The bētānu is where capture becomes structure. Renaming, rations, tutelage, and reassignment stabilize the state's hold. The presence of documented queens and palace women in tombs at Nimrud demonstrates a hierarchical system with seals, titles, and wealth. Foreign-born women could be slotted into it with new names and new loyalties. Ideological pressure. Treaties make families exposed surfaces of loyalty. Break an oath, and the curse imagines disaster for wives and children. The theology is cosmic. The practice is mundane, a messenger with a reminder. The cumulative effect reframes the opening image. The line of captives is not only a wound, it is a wire. It connects provincial elders to palace courtiers, garrison commanders to caravan leaders. When a foreign queen is rehoused as a palace woman, and later rebranded as a client monarch, Tabua being the emblematic example, the empire converts defeat into administration. Scholars debate the scale. In some regions, royal women may have been killed or exiled rather than integrated. In others, alliances through marriage or tutelage prevailed. Records suggest pragmatism more than doctrine. The empire used what worked. The twist is this: the unspeakable was not silence. It was efficiency. The state did not need to describe humiliation to use it. A line in a ledger, brought to Nineveh, was enough. The audience understood the rest. So what did Assyrians do to the wives of defeated enemies? They relocated them, reclassified them, and redeployed them. Some became hostages. Some became palace women. A few became queens again, Assyria's queens. The policy thrived precisely because it blurred lines between domestic life and statecraft. The drums in the palace yard sound different now. They are not triumph. They are timers, and the clock runs wherever families can be turned into leverage. Return to the woman from the cold open. She walks the same courtyard, now with students following. She carries seals that open storerooms. She can send a message that moves 10 carts of grain. Above her, a relief shows captives in a line. Below, she instructs girls to sing in 2 languages. Empires do not survive on iron alone. They live on administration, fear, and the quiet compliance produced when a family is under watch. The Assyrian record, prisms, reliefs, treaties, shows a system that instrumentalized women closest to power. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough to become a recognizable tactic. What can be learned? That targeting the intimate remains a potent tool. That visibility, public lists, public images, matters. That silences in the archive are not absence of pain, but absence of description, and that the word unspeakable often hides what is, in fact, brutally well documented. In the last shot, the woman pauses beneath a winged bull. She presses her palm to the cool stone, listening for a heartbeat in rock. There is none. The heartbeat is elsewhere, in ledgers, in treaties, in new names written on clay. She steps forward, pupils of others catching her shadow. The gate yawns. Outside, roads braid the land like cords pulled tight. The procession never really ended. It just learned to walk inside walls. In this chapter, the wives of defeated enemies became instruments of empire, not just in Assyria's wars, but in its peacetime paperwork. We followed a woman from capture to a new title, watched the policy engine work, and read the clay where names became leverage. Next time, another empire faces the same temptation, Achaemenid Persia. When a satrap rebels, what happens to his household? Are royal women again the fuse or the firebreak? If this deep dive into policy, inscription, and lived cost worked for you, like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which source did you find most revealing? The prisms, the reliefs, or the tombs? And what do you want us to read on camera next? Until then, watch the ledgers. They often outlive the kings.